Start commenting here.
Okay. Is audio okay? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Great. So we have heard about how it's problematic that the Amazon courts are basically a black box in which adjudication is done without anyone knowing in any source of how that works. But we have a few additional reasons why normal courts in which these disputes could be settled are just better. First of all, because they are independent, they are run by the state, they are, like as a separate power within a state. They adhere to no influence other than their own. They also have strict requirements for who can be a judge and who can be working on those courts than Amazon has. We have no idea what sort of like quality standards Amazon has for the people handling those types of adjudications. So those could be people who just, I don't know, have been profitable for Amazon in some way or other and actually don't even have any sort of like legal training whatsoever. Also, judges in normal courts have sworn an oath to adhere to certain standards, and those standards are not the Amazon policy, the Amazon company policy. And also they are required to be transparent and public, whereas the Amazon court does not. So moving on to our extension, we want to talk a bit about how these rulings does hurt workers' rights, and we want to talk about how these rulings, in a case of like a slippery slope, hurt smaller companies especially hard. So let's talk a bit about who the sellers are that we're talking about, because third-party sellers can be like individuals, but we're probably talking about like smaller companies that kind of like produce niche products, and we believe that they are very dependent on Amazon because they can't rely on just like people dropping in by their store enough to actually make a profit or to even break even, because people have become so dependent on the comfort that Amazon gives them that they really can't go around big online retailers. So now Amazon has kind of ridiculously high standards for what the quality of like the speed of delivery that they have. For example, they have the policy that, for example, when you're a Prime customer, you kind of expect your stuff to come around like 1 or 2 days after you ordered it. So that means that even if you order from a third party seller, that you expect that stuff to come on time. So that means that all of these small companies already face extensive pressure from Amazon to comply with these things, and we believe that this is made substantially worse by those internal courts, because even if I've never been faced with such a court, I might know about other sellers who have. And I think it is fair to believe that usually those things are ruled in favor of Amazon, because obviously if for some reason you couldn't comply with the speed of delivery, that is your fault. That is not Amazon's fault. You broke your contract, you pay a fine. This especially will have hit companies pretty hard during the current COVID crisis, because as opposed to a normal court of legislation who would probably take these circumstances into account, Amazon is by no means required to do so. So that means that sellers are very likely to comply with those standards at all costs, because A, they can't afford to lose all the customers that they get on Amazon, so they can't afford to lose like the contract that they have with Amazon, and B, because they probably can't afford to pay the fines that Amazon will impose on them. So that means that they'll be way more likely to push pressure onto their workers in order to deliver stuff on time, because, for example, if they produce something that has to be shipped to an Amazon warehouse before actually being shipped out, that means that they're extending the pressure that Amazon puts on them onto the workers. That means that their workers are going to be working overtime as well. They might be working in crowded spaces because they can't afford to let people off in order to ensure social distancing or ensure health and safety of all of them, and like not granting them enough breaks. So what we're seeing is that Amazon will actually extend pressure to third-party sellers and kind of outsource the problems that they already have within their own warehouses, now also affecting third-party sellers. We also want to point out that, like workers in the area, whether they're working for Amazon or third-party, will mostly be assembly line workers who are not very likely to be able to kind of go up against that, especially not if they're working for a small seller, because they are probably aware that there's not a lot of other career options for them, or because they're actually attached to the company in some way and want to see that company succeed. So we also believe that this will be taken over to other companies simply because of the principle that if I grant the right to have internal adjudications for disputes between Amazon and third-party sellers, I'm more, Other retailers, like for example eBay or Etsy, will be well within their rights to expect the same things from them. Even Facebook now has its own marketplace where you can sell used goods and whatnot. So that means that those retailers will be also likely to kind of expect that same benefit, because if it's granted to one company, it should also be granted to them. What does that mean? That means that the minimum standards will not really exist anymore, because there will be no one to adhere to them. So we'll see more internal courts for disputes between many other sellers. So that means that there'll be even less freedom of choice for third-party sellers, because in the status quo, I, for example, still have the option to, for example,
sorry, на телефоне, оказывается.
no, thank you. For example, if I want to go over, if I don't want to do Amazon, I could still go over to, for example, eBay or Etsy and could avoid having to deal with those internal courts. But now I don't even have that option anymore. So that means that small companies are being screwed over.
Это ее dочки?
Which means that
Ну и сыновья. Хозяйка.
Which means that which means that they'll be able to impose more and more pressure onto third-party sellers, and that they're even being able to put to threaten them more into, for example, producing and shipping super fast, even though that might not be initially profitable for a small company, that they'd be able to threaten them into putting more and more pressure onto their own workers. So it will see a change into how companies are being treated as a whole. And we believe that this is bad, because it will basically outsource all of the problems that we're already seeing in the supply chains of big companies to smaller companies as well. So the third point, which I'm going to bring up real quick, is how we believe that these internal courts will also lead to things flying under the radar of criminal justice, which would very well belong there. So right now, Amazon has a big incentive, as has actually been pointed out by opposition, to kind of solve problems very quickly, because they worry about their reputation. We believe that this is kind of bad, because that means that they'll be more likely to use those internal courts to get rid of problematic sellers as fast as possible, because that means no bad reputation for them. So for example, if someone points out that someone is selling pretty illicit stuff on the website, they'll use those internal adjudications to get rid of that stuff as fast as possible. But this also means that there's a higher chance that they're not going to appoint this stuff to an actual court, which means that there will be no follow-up, because Amazon is no criminal justice entity. So there will probably no follow-up on who sold this stuff, which means that, for example, someone selling, I don't know, sex dolls in the shape of children will just set up on some other website without facing any consequences, which means that there will be a lot of people flying under the radar of criminal justice, because there's no actual court case to be made by Amazon for fear of bad press. So with all of that in mind, please vote up. No, God, sorry.
Thank the member comment for that speech, and please remind everyone to make sure that they are muted during our speeches, except possibly for POIs, and call upon member of opposition to extend on the side opposition here.
Okay, am I audible? Awesome. So, Jesus, where's my phone? One second. Okay, sorry. Okay, so starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, we believe that opening a position is doing a good job in proving to us that sometimes Amazon is good. Later, OG is trying to prove to us sometimes Amazon is bad to some extent and has some specific profits, specific needs that are actually wrong. What we are going to prove to you, it absolutely doesn't matter, because the most important thing is that we are going to shift responsibility towards the state about any kind of violations in the first place, about caring and creating and securing those sellers' rights, third sellers' rights in the first place. And why this necessarily is going to be bad. At first, I'm going to respond towards closing government and a little bit towards opening government. What you're trying to do in this, and this is the most important part of the argumentation, is state is better in providing any kind of security towards those third-party sellers, because they're independent, because they're run by the state, because they have the responsibility for who is going to have legal training and who is going to be the judge in the first place. Also, they're trying to prove some some things about how exactly those codes have more possibilities for companies to actually secure themselves. But actually they shot themselves in the foot because of one simple thing. They're proving to me that Amazon is a monopolist in the first place, right? It is the biggest company with no alternative. CG is basing full argumentation on it. It's impossible to find any other company that actually might do everything that Amazon does right now, right? And the biggest problem is we believe that actually we're going to talk about external USA courts, because that is exactly the place where Amazon is going to have external arbitration in the first place. This is a common law system. It means it is strongly provided by the economical status and political lobbying in the first place. How strong your lawyer is, how good your lawyer is in the first place, how well he knows how to use specific things around the courts in the first place, right? He needs specific training to actually provide to the judge right causes. And we believe that actually if Amazon cares so much about winning most of the process in the first place, if Amazon cares so much about the profit in the first place, probably that about who's going to violate is stronger is a wash in the first place, right? Because if they can so easily manipulate the internal courts, we believe that with the economical monopolists in the first place, be the strongest company of their kind, beating eBay or whoever you want to talk about, with just amounts of money that are incredible in the first place, you probably have enough money to get enough good accords to do something like all companies are doing right now in the USA, for example, to Venezuela or to Colombia in the first place. So blocking systematically any court and any justice as is happening towards them. We believe that if it is impossible for government to prove in the first place that those courts are going to be better because they are independent, we believe that most of their argumentation is a wash in the first place. Later, in case of accountability, how you cannot see what is happening behind the doors, we believe it's simply untrue. Why is that? When you've been screwed by a company that is actually giving and providing you any kind of profit in the first place, you are going to say that publicly. That is what was happening, for example, with workers' rights violations, and thus workers wanted to say that Amazon is screwing them over. We believe that this company is going to be screwed over by Amazon. Probably it will be told in the first place that we've been screwed by the internal arbitrary. They've been biased, they've been manipulated by the Amazon, and we lost a lot of money because of that in the first place, right? We do not understand why it's not going to happen. Nobody proves us that. So let's go for this shifting argumentation, right? As a state, we're making a statement with a specific ban. Amazon is not responsible for solving those disputes in the first place. That external cause will be comparatively better, and we want to do so as a state in the first place. It means we are telling that not Amazon is the most important player in that specific, providing any kind of justice in the first place, but it's going to be a state, right? We are giving a possibility for exploiting the system that we have currently in the law system in the first place, right? Because we are letting Amazon to lose the responsibility they're having for providing good law system, providing good arbitrary in the first place, right? We are giving them responsibility to tell, we are really sorry, we are living in that kind of law system. It might have some flaws. We can use our economical lobbying, can use our political lobbying to our own interests in the first place. And you're doing that because you gave us the possibility, you banned our own arbitrary in the first place, right? I proved to you also why American mediation system and law system is not perfect in case of proving exactly when somebody is a bigger company in the first place. Once again, you can see that clearly in, for example, oil companies in Nigeria or Venezuela, how they used poorer people, poorer companies to actually not pay them any money and subsidies in the first place. But right now, let's look, where is the difference in this debate, dear panel? When you're a huge company and you might be at first accused of being biased, accused of not working in an accountability way, you might lose your PR in the first place. You do not want to have those arbitraries in the first place. You would prefer to have a good situation and not have any disputes and not have any fights against those companies when you do not have to, right? You would just prefer not to fight again. That will be the most profitable thing for you, because you will not risk your reputation, because you will not risk your money in this arbitrary, you will not risk public scrutinizing because of what you have done right now, right? You are not going to be told you are biased, you are unfair, everything that government is trying to prove to us that social perspective is in the first place. Because of that, right now, with responsibilities on your side of the house and on the Amazon side of the house, there's a huge possibility they will keep it accountable as possible, and they will just be as fair as possible towards the company. When we are banning those specific arbitrary codes in the first place, we believe they do not have to care as much about not having those disputes and those courts in the first place. because right now, if they win in this specific court system, or if they lose in their court system, it's not their responsibility if something was wrong. It was the law system, it was the mistake of the state, and they don't have to care about it. And with them being so monopolist, are both governments trying to prove to us in this specific debate, being so strong as they are trying to claim, we believe that this is the perfect thing for them to do. What are the impacts from that? A, worse mediations in the first place, because right now they're going to be sometimes, they will occur more, because actually Amazon will try to go into profit if governments believe so, that they prefer about profit in the first place. They will actually go into worse third sellers' rights, and they will actually exploit those third-party sellers' rights right now, because they will not have to care about any PR attacking, any losing in the stock market. Like, for example, when workers' rights explosion came out and they lost on the stock market about 15 to 20% of their possible profits in the first place, they will not have to risk about that, because actually they're fighting in the external court, right? Second thing, less chance to keep the company accountable, right? To call out their exploitation in the first place, to economically influence them, to keep themselves sellers friendly in the first place, right? We believe it is the most important thing in this specific debate if we care about it so much. Because of all those reasons, I'm really proud to oppose.
I thank the member for opposition for that speech and call upon Government Whip to summarize the case for said government here.
Can you hear me? So first of all, on the question if courts are actually better than what Amazon provides us with. As Mira has already said, there's a lot of benefits to court, like having educated people, having like neutral people that aren't financially reliant on Amazon, etc. But I want to reply to a lot of things that came up by the opposition side, because those were actually good arguments. So first of all, opening opposition tells us that Amazon will fire you if you go to a public court, right? First of all, we believe that's not the case. And in regards to that, we have to look at the types of companies that there are on Amazon. There's a lot of third-party sellers that are like smaller companies that regularly change their name that nobody really knows of, like no-name companies like from China that just produce and often have like an easy time renaming themselves, right? So if Amazon fires them, it's very easy to just set up a new name for those things, right? But even for the small companies, we don't believe that Amazon will do that, because while Amazon is evil, they're not stupid, right? And they're not personally resentful. Like Amazon is a rational company. Jeff Bezos is a rational actor who doesn't care if you like hurt his feelings in like a civil lawsuit, which is something that regularly happens with most normal companies that don't operate like Amazon. But also Amazon has like very small profit margins actually, right? So they make like very little profit, and they're only so big because they trade like so much, right? So they care about not losing even the smallest profit margins, right? And we believe that especially like bigger companies actually won't just be able to be kicked out by Amazon, won't be able to be fired, because Amazon still wants to get that money, right? And as long as they're profitable, they will actually keep them. Then we hear from closing opposition also an argument about like that sort of pressure that is created by Amazon. And they talk about like lobbying and pressuring judges in the US, right? But especially in the US, like judges are under a lot of public scrutiny, and closing opposition doesn't show us anything how that makes things worse. In the worst case, right? It's still equally bad under our side of the house as it is under theirs, but it's not actually worse. But we actually believe it's better under our side of the house, because you do get public scrutiny both of Amazon and the courts, right? Unlike in those secret trials, right? Because that's something that closing opposition has completely missed, that there is no public scrutiny, or there cannot be any public scrutiny if those things are being kept secret. Then they say, well, if there's something going wrong, it will be seen as the fault of the court. We believe that voters are rationally enough to see both the court as well as Amazon at fault when something bad happens, right? Then we've heard from opening opposition that is faster and easier to apply, right? That's mainly because the decisions are worse, but also they don't care about nuance or the law, but rather for what's best for Amazon, right? But also the fact that it's faster and easier to like sue someone also makes it easier for Amazon to sue companies for like very small things, right? And screw them over for very small things, putting them under the incredibly high pressure that Mira has told you about. Then we constantly hear from both opposition sides that Amazon cares about its reputation. Like everybody knows Amazon has really bad working standards and screws over the third-party sellers all the time. That's not a secret, right? Imagine how much we would know if those court cases were actually public, right? Because now they're being kept under secrecy, and we believe that we would know even more on the outside of the house. But the issue with that is, right, with the public scrutiny, is that that bad reputation that they get from screwing companies over, which is now being kept a secret within companies, is actually good for Amazon because it enforces, it pushes companies to the highest standards, right? When I know, or when I've heard from like some of my friend who works in another company that Amazon has screwed them over for not delivering within half a day, right? That puts a lot of pressure on those companies to deliver in one day, right? So bad scrutiny is actually like a good thing for Amazon in this case, right? Because it forces companies to have those super high standards. And that is what we as the only team so far bring to the debate, like how that actually affects real people rather than just companies, right? And Mira tells you those high standards mean that companies are driven more and more to deliver within one day to like the Amazon warehouse, right? To deliver within like half day to the distribution center, right? To force the employees to package the things incredibly fast, to punish them really harshly when something is broken one time, because they know, or they might be scared that they're gonna be like punished very harshly because it's so easy for Amazon to do that if something just goes a little bit wrong, right? So we believe that is very bad in the case of Amazon, but it would be even worse if that's spilled over to other companies as well. Opening opposition tells us, oh, there's like the principle of owning your own property, right? But we're talking about things that are relevant in front of civil or criminal court, right? So clearly things where something wrong has happened, something that's wrong in the eyes of the law, right? And people cannot consent to have the law signed away because that would essentially outrule courts, making courts unnecessary. The issue, however, is that in the vast majority of countries, constitutionally, the state cannot discriminate between one company and another, which means if you allow that for Amazon, you also have to allow it for Facebook, you have to allow it for eBay, etc., right? Meaning that you essentially make courts unnecessary and outlawing democratic control, allowing especially big companies to be more pushy towards those small companies. It's easier to like overcharge smaller companies, right? It's easier to punish them very harsh if they weren't fast enough in their delivery, right? That means it pushes those small companies more and more, even when that's not financially feasible for them, right? And now they can be sued for like small things that wouldn't hold up in an actual court. Like not having delivered within one day is probably not something that would hold up in a civil court, right? Or not something that would be worth it, even taking it to court for Amazon. But now they can be sued over it, right? Meaning that either they have to like punish the workers really harshly, or they lose a lot of money, right? Meaning that that Amazon gets like more and more competitive, right? And eventually like Amazon has an easier time to like get rid of those companies or push its own productions that it has in like certain areas like books, for example, right? And treat those small companies really, really unfairly. So it's very bad for the workers. And in the long term, it's also very bad for small companies, which means that consumers get less choice overall. Very proud to propose.
I thank the government for its speech and call upon the opposition whip to conclude this debate as a whole. Here.
Can you hear me? So 3, 2, 1, and start. So I will start with comparative to the government side. And beginning with opening government, they say that Amazon will abuse and there will be no reaction from any external institutions or public opinion for the violations. So the first thing is that my partner shows you that Amazon have a lot of incentives to not abuse the rights of the sellers. And secondly, as we said, there is always a risk for Amazon that someone will react, because if you are a seller and you are extremely unhappy with the results of the arbitrary, internal arbitrary, you can always go, if it is seriously something big for you, you can always try to go to external court, or try to make this case loud to make other people know about it, make media talk about it, and try to get some consequences towards Amazon. And the opening government doesn't really tell us why the external courts are such a great alternative. And what we do is we show you that actually external courts will possibly work even worse than the internal courts, but about this later. Now with CG, okay, they say that sellers will break their workers' right because they will try to meet Amazon's expectations. And actually, the sad fact is that this may happen on both sides. So this argument is not actually on CG, because it may, I mean, if the alternative is external court, this situation may look just the same, because the sellers, if they have to meet some expectations because Amazon wants them to, and they can't avoid it anyway, there is always a risk that their workers will actually suffer because of that. But it works just the same with internal or external courts. Okay, and generally the government side assumes that external courts are on comparative better than internal courts. And this is just completely untrue, because as my partner said, Amazon would probably deal with their law problems on the USA, where actually the system works for the richer. And the first thing is that the jury is easy to be manipulated, in fact, by great lawyers, and you definitely need to have a lot of money to hire the best lawyers. And for sure, Amazon is the richest one here, so they will probably have the best lawyers. They will be able to make the cases last longer, and this will be just death to the sellers, because even if they will be able to win the case in the external court, they will just be ended financially after years and years of fight with Amazon. So this will probably be financially just hurt for them. And if they are on Amazon to sell and to make money, these processes will just be the opposite effect. So there is no for the sellers in this alternative world when they can go to external courts. And actually, the sellers are the most important in this debate. And what we tell you is, and this is our extension and the most important thing in this debate, as we think, is that in the world where Amazon is fully responsible for the the cases and the arbitrary and the courts inside, they are truly deeply incentivized to care, to have like the least amount of the cases that is possible, because every case that happens and they have to pursue this law process, every case is for them a risk of being accused of manipulation and violation. So their best interest is to care for the rights of the sellers the best they can, to make the number of cases in the internal court the lowest. So this is the situation where actually Amazon is fully responsible for caring about sellers and for caring about their rights and for making this situation relatively good and for making sellers satisfied with, okay, it's 6 minutes. Okay, so I think in this debate, okay, so now referring to opening opposition, we think that they do a good job talking about incentives of Amazon connected to their good PR, not to make these violations. But actually our team expands it and tell you what that the most important thing is that by having this internal courts, Amazon is deeply incentivized to care about the rights because this is just on their side and not on the side of, for example, the state. And in fact, in the world of Gov, Amazon would not be responsible. Okay, it's over. So thank you.
Thank the opposition wait for that speech and everyone for the debate. Please virtually shake hands. I think Olhas, will you be putting us to like a breakout room?
Yeah, we'll putting you into a breakout room. Just
Great,
in a
thanks.
minute. I invited you to the breakout room, and other guys, please.
Sorry, I can't see anything.
Well, so everyone else can stay here and wait for the deliberation.